See if that's on. Okay, so welcome. This is the London Festival of Architecture. Their theme this year is care in its broadest sense. In particular, we're going to talk about regeneration and through the lens of the Royal Ordnance in Northampton, and these issues apply across the country. And we're very lucky today to have Michael Chittenden, who's the owner of the site, with us. But before we just go on to the next piece, just do email or use the chat for questions. And we're such a close group here anyway, and we'll stop at certain points and we'll go through the questions, and we'll do it in stages anyway as we talk about it and talk about broader issues and closer issues to, you know, the Royal Ordnance. Well, Michael, would you perhaps like to start by talking to us a little bit about why and when you bought the site and the issues you saw, and a bit about your position as you came into this?
Well, hello. As Paul said, I'm Michael Chittenden. I bought the Royal Ordnance Depot around 7 years ago, and there's someone waiting to come in.
Yeah.
And why I bought it, I immediately, when I walked around it, I immediately thought, I'm going to buy this. I hope I can get the money and I hope I can get it at the right price. But walking around it, I immediately got, I suppose excited is the right word, which, I mean, I've been no good at playing poker and I'm not that good at negotiating, because I do get excited about certain properties, and probably the seller could sense that a bit. And it was just fabulous. You know, it took a good half an hour to walk round it. It's over 250 yards long, just one way. It's like a village. And I thought I'd be very lucky and very privileged to own it. And so my heart did get in the way a little bit, but I soon agreed a price. And it's one I didn't do. I mean, I didn't do much due diligence. There's a hell of a lot of due diligence that could have been done and should have been done, but I didn't. And in a way, I didn't want to know the negatives. I was looking for reasons to buy it. I just kept saying to my solicitor, "Yeah, don't worry about that. I'm happy with that." Because there was lots of risks and lots of unknowns. And when I did complete, I thought. I remember the day I thought, crikey, I thought, what have I done? Because I then, once you sort of own it and perhaps the excitement goes and you start thinking about the reality, I thought that there's a lot of square footage here. There's a lot of risk. It's grade 2 star listed. There's a lot I don't know. And are the council going to start serving notices? Are the authorities going to get very heavy and make me repair this and make me repair that? So there's lots of unknowns when I first bought it. So it was very worrying. But since that day, every week, every month, I've worked one way or another on it, improving it. So why I bought it? Because I loved it. I worked the figures out financially, of course, and I thought it was going to be okay financially, providing the risks went the right way, or most of them went the right way. And in the past, I've bought similar properties. I seem to be drawn to grade 2 and grade or listed buildings, older buildings that I can regenerate and make something of. All my portfolio is that sort of thing. Some of it I've sold, and a lot of it I've kept. And it's not just a property investment; it's a business as well. And this is one of those where it's a property at its heart, but it is a business. It's a business park. There's all sorts of tenants there, so it's a business.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the site and what you bought? I mean,
yeah. So day one, I bought the depot, and that's a collection of buildings, all different shapes and sizes, ranging from a coal shed that's 40 square feet that we get £100 a month for now, up to the larger building, which that would be building 14, and that's 25,000 square feet. So various buildings that were built in a similar century, let's say. I mean, Paul will correct me on the exact years, but a lot of it was built, was it late 1800s, Paul, and then the rest of it in the 1900s?
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that.
Yeah, and even the later buildings were built very similar to the older buildings, so that it's very architecturally pleasing. It's a fantastic looking collection of buildings, very symmetrical, very substantial, enormous doors and rooms and windows. It's fabulous. So 200,000 square feet of different buildings, shapes and sizes, with a canal running down it. It's had over its life, it's had every type of transport. It's had horses, then canal, then the railway, and then roads and lorries and vans, which it is now. So it's seen every sort of change in transport uses in England. So as you can see there, the Ordnance Canal, the canal's still there. It's unused, but it's a fabulous feature. And then a couple of years after that, a few years ago, I was lucky enough to buy the magazine store. It's called the magazine enclosure there, and that's where they kept the literally the gunpowder, and then in later years the bullets and missiles, so that if that was hit by the Germans or whoever we was at war at, or there was an explosion, there was an accident there, it would kill far fewer people there than stationed at the ordnance depot. Because during its heyday, when it was owned by the owned by the armed forces, there was over 2,000 people stationed at the ordnance depot. In fact, one of the buildings is a special block built just for the women that were stationed there, so they didn't have to share the toilets with the men. They built a special block just for women, and it's a row of cubicles. It's still there. I mean, it's still a row of toilets, and it's one of the buildings. And in fact, I'm going to get to that one soon and let it out one way or another.
So one particular question then, what did you see as the main issues that you were going to face as the developer at the get-go? What were your top 3 issues?
Issues. Well, when I first bought it, I thought I'm going to try and get as much residential consent here as possible. And all of it residential was on my mind. I thought I'd end up with a beautiful development of flats and houses, all within beautiful listed buildings. But I soon found that the local authorities really were against that. I went to see them a couple of times and they were dead against residential. And that's not to say that you couldn't do it, as we all know. That doesn't mean you definitely can't. That just means they're not going to support it. So I wanted the project to cover itself financially in the interim, and it'd been said to me, and the previous owner obviously thought it was not viable to spend money on the buildings and let them as they are as commercial buildings. And I thought, shall I do that or shall I not do it? If I left it empty, my viability argument to the authorities and the planning departments would be stronger, because I could say, look, it's not viable as anything other than the residential development. And I know that's a very powerful argument, and a genuine argument in many cases, but I didn't want to leave it sitting there empty. So I went about going into every building and trying to make it rentable. There was only 4 tenants when I bought it. A couple of those weren't paying the rent, so it really wasn't rented in any sort of way. So I set about making the building slowly viable. And I know that's probably proved to the council it is viable as a commercial opportunity, and therefore doesn't need to go to residential. But I don't mind that now. I've realised that it's a very viable proposition with a mixed use. So that's, as you know, obviously, Paul, that's what we're going after. And that taught me a lesson in that it doesn't all have to be about residential, and it's certainly a lot easier route to the one I've done, and will be viable. Whether it's more profitable or not, I doubt, but a lot easier, a lot less time, a lot less stress, and a lot more enjoyable, I think. Yeah. Over the years, I've actually really warmed to the opinion of the local listed building department, in that these buildings should be preserved and kept as much as possible as they used to be. So not divided up so much, not new doorways put in. It's not to say I wouldn't, but as least as possible. And I'm on board with that. I don't want to bash walls down and put windows in where they shouldn't be, and divide them up with modern walls.
Yeah.
That was one challenge, whether or not to keep it empty or put tenants in. The other big one was there was lots of areas that were going to cost a lot of money with no return. As an example, the canal walls needed repairing, but I had to spend money on the canal wall, and then there's nothing to rent out at the end of it, so it's money just on infrastructure. And there was quite a lot of that, and there is quite a lot of it. So it's been a balance between when to do those. So I've been letting out the various areas, getting rent in, and spending it on areas that then don't generate an income.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you. So the question then was, once you got this initial site, which for some it might have been called a white elephant, for others it's a joy and lots of potential, and it is a beautiful site. The Grand Canal there, you can see right down the middle, has been diverted. They brought the arms from Birmingham and diverted this spur through the middle here, and then built these big buildings either side with big gaps to allow them to get to the canal very easily. And the horses would drive with the artillery in one end, drop off the artillery and come off the other. And they could do this very fast. And Northampton is an amazing place. It's the centre of the country geographically. And this allowed them either to get to any coast in the case of Napoleonic invasion or civil war. And then, having built these main buildings, they then built the wall around it with these bastions and walls all the way around. And as you saw from the previous slide, which I can just pop back very quickly, here they had the barracks here, the fields for the horses. This was the spur. These are turning sort of circles or pools for the barges. And then by 2016, they developed all the housing around it and between it. In fact, this village had grown, and there's a light industrial park up here. So there's been a lot of transition. It was the end of the 50s, really, when it got demilitarized. There's another major change of use, as well as basically seeing the Industrial Revolution occur. So how do we get from that to this? How do we get from the issue of this to a vision that works? And that's sort of the next question, really. And we've called this environmental explosion. And I'll just talk a little bit briefly about sort of the framework we're facing today, because the environmental question isn't to be understood by itself. You know, we remember Brundtland back in the 1980s, development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. We all know about that, and how sustainability was defined in terms of economic, social, and environmental terms. And the emphasis is becoming really on resilience of those three terms. Brundtland also went on to say, if I can get this to, there we go, in the 1980s, it actually, it's not really the technological challenges of renewables, it's actually the social and institutional frameworks. That's the people, the economy, the systems. And here we are today, still trying to catch up with these ideas, basically. And it's been a slow burn, but finally we're getting there. And then on top of that, more recently, 2009, you have lots of concepts. This one's about planetary boundaries. Namely, if we step over certain things, a boundary of biodiversity use, I've gone the wrong way here, biodiversity loss, then there's no way back. Similarly with health, which is nitrogen and phosphorus cycle, and these various things. And that is built on the sort of economic principles sort of identified back in the 1972 on the limits of growth. So before even the Brundtland, where they were saying, you know, there are externalities, but you can't really rely on them. We're now a closed system. And so there's basically, and now here we are, March 2021, our own government, Build Back Better, our plan for growth. What's interesting about this short document are these things I've highlighted here, is that one, it affects, and they have a chapter on each of these, so it's worth a quick read of it if someone fancies in the bath. Investment, so finance, so increasingly there are financial requirements to have growth, improvement in green issues. Major, some of the major developers in the world now are going down this path, not as a philanthropic thing, but as an inherent thing. Infrastructure, investment in structure, very Keynesian. Skills and innovation. Innovation as well is part of not just about technology, but the knowledge that goes with technology. That is actually what it is. And then every part is their part about inclusivity, and they are aiming for net zero. So this is a massive statement which they hope to achieve. And there's a wide-ranging debate, as we all know, is 1.5 degrees increase in global temperature enough? Is that too much? Is 2 degrees too much? Is it too late because of the planetary boundaries? Once we go over them, it'll be a self-fulfilling sort of process. So basically, you would be forgiven for thinking there is a lot to think about to get this right when you're looking ahead, both economically, environmentally, and in terms of the environment. And I was going to go into the model next, but I just wonder if there are any questions to raise them. But since time's going on, I'm just going to go straight ahead to the next bit very quickly. And we'll have some questions probably towards the end, just so that we get through this. Why do the project and identifying value? So this is a method we use to sort of work with all these disparate parts that are going on, and these moving parts, and not only that, these changing parts over short term, medium term, long term. And how do you understand resilience of a project? So the first thing obviously we look at is use, greater efficiency of operations. A home is a primary thing. Economic, so this is the Marxian duo, use value and economic value. So for the developer, it's capital, rental, footfall, retailing. The social value is the other part of this. So greater teams, communities. Environmental, so not just carbon, but there's direct impact on us for healthier, longer lasting biodiversity. It's a very broad thing. Identity, so the brand, you might associate that with an office that has its own identity, but we all require them, both as a development such as this, as a country. There was a lot of that. And it also goes beyond that, how we see ourselves, and it's often seen as a very strong motivating factor to do anything at all, because we have a purpose. And then finally, we look at the cultural, which is both limited in the sense of sort of the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, but also more wider, which is the ways of living, how we decide to interact with each other, those sort of local habits. And on this site, when Michael bought it, he was telling me a story where he found that one day they all turned up in their livery and were doing an event, replicating certain times of the war, which he hadn't heard about before. What is really important once you take these 6 things is that actually they all feed into each other and give you a really strong resilience and enhanced return. So the social groups will vary and the demography will change, obviously. That will help as it changes. There'll be word of mouth also, but there'll be feedback into use. And obviously, if there's greater use and ways of changing buildings, then you're going to get a greater economic return and less void periods. And similarly, if there's a cultural system of things going on, again, you get footfall. So all of these work together very strongly and allow a way of thinking about these sorts of projects over the long term. So here, I'm now going to give some quick examples of things I've been involved in just to illustrate that. This is the British Museum Master Plan. So we see this as a cultural thing initially, but actually there's a massive identity. They had days for, they had Africa days. They put a Persian statue on one table on a dinner with the American ambassador and Dabel Dimbleby and said, let's talk about the Middle East, thereby putting the Middle East history into a very different context, one that actually might see it as unity and collaboration. This is some master plan vision we did for the Diocese of London. They had a lot of schools, and how do you keep the mindfulness? These are all things we're going to draw on. This was an 8,000 home zero carbon development in North London. So here we're the patterns of buildings. On the bottom, you see more houses and smaller, but with work units in them. Then you have mid-rise houses, a huge park, and then you also have these tall blocks. On top of that, we obviously have to have schools and shops. So suddenly we're talking about something much bigger, and the invisible structures becoming very much the same part as important as the visible structures. This is White City at Shepherd's Bush, which I was involved in. And this, retail, what does retail mean today? And that's changing fundamentally. And there's a lot of talk about the experience of why you would go out and touch the products, not just do it online, and what other benefits there are, the social values as well, brand, obviously. This is a school, and this brings forward an issue on economy, for instance. So this was a school theatre where the floor meterage doubled after the first 3 weeks from what the original budget briefing was, but we had to do it within the same budget. So out of this came this notion of don't build what you don't need, and that in itself draws together the economic with the environmental in one hit. This is an innovation hub in Smithfield, and again, this is where economies took. Again, you're seeing a convergence of the politicians thinking about startups as being fundamental. It doesn't matter which side, left or right. This is now seen as key to how cities develop. How do you make an innovation hub? And it's not just a shared workspace. It's a lot more than that. It's about the network that goes with it. And that's a formal network, namely lenders, technology people who can make things, as well as the informal ones that everybody talks about, sitting around as you meet each other. And then this is a bridge between 2 buildings, which is offices now. So this notion of connectivity, this one's now built, again brings identity, but it also increases. In this case, it reduces the requirement to have extra receptions and more workspace, as well as being it's a telecoms company. They like this idea of connectivity, and they're really going for it. And these are low energy towers, so living. So that is where we're starting to see these things, these 6 values, and you can identify them with single buildings, but actually these buildings have multi values anyway. So it's how do you make the most of those values, and it's a team effort. Moving on then, so this is where we are with this particular scheme, and I'm going to keep going. So we looked at the analysis. The bottom section here is the derelict occasional parking. Up the top, it was unused, where there used to be concrete bases and a lot of empty buildings, basically, as well as big trucks that have been put here post post-demilitarization. So the next stage was to look at what the major and secondary spaces were. This piece down the middle with the canal is definitely the strongest piece about it, and these secondary spaces. Views across and down. So analysis, this was permeability. So you can't do a lot with these listed buildings in many ways. So we looked at which bits had entrances and how we might start to think about the opportunities we had for the site. And this is it, pretty well as Michael inherited it or bought it. So you see the trucks up the side, there's litter. It was pretty overgrown in places. And without the trucks, and yeah, you can see that suddenly these workplaces are utterly stunning to be in. And on the environmental side, there was a long delay at one stage where there needed to be newt reviews and various things within the canal, and the canal repaired as part of the biodiversity. Yeah. And this here is to the one side, this with the proposal. So you can see below the number 1, there's a concept that we would introduce doors there for the first retail unit, which is now going, actually, the first retail unit there. It's got permission. And then to the right of that, a much later phase was for a hotel. Again, when people visit from afar, where do they stay? You know, so you're thinking in multi dimensions and uses. So again, you know, how do we get to something that might be viable? And then coming back to the people, I think this is something that, you know, isn't discussed enough, really. The demography in China, it's clearer, where they are much more overt about their population development. But in this country, it is clearer, but it's not always obvious to people. Oh, so here we looked at the distances to the local areas, local hubs, neighborhood areas, larger areas, and the sorts of uses we'd expect to see for a thriving community, and then try to identify what the Royal Ordnance Depot, which is at the center of a lot of this village and this other bit to the north, would help. So that was part of seeing what would be compatible uses. Now, obviously, the first thing one thinks about when one's thinking about people is homes, in fact, in my mind. And that's where Michael started just now. So we did a first to third age home several years ago, and it's a model that we developed, a new type of model for how you do housing. And these were the sorts of issues that come out of it, that the locality is important to people, the place and the people. This is the sort of cultural side as well as the geographical one, if you like. The control of the environment leads to longevity, you know, and that's really important. Control of environment, actually, they say, refers to sort of gives meaning to people if you can control and meaning in marketing terms might also mean stickiness and people wanting to stay there, where old age homes are depressing and the rest of it. Low maintenance, ongoing costs, a low energy new build. So fabric first is the way we often talk about this. It was a split site with no acquisition costs, so densification. And now that's a really important principle in terms of making this transition that we're going through sort of across the country and the world, in fact, if it allows the viability to work better. And it can be done quite well, actually, and I believe. And people do have a desire and ability to stay in a house for a long period of time, and that means their lives will change. And you can see there, I talked about 3 beds. So we've got children, grandchildren, or a carer, as well as the people there who live there. So there can be a change through their lives. And then the other thing is fantastic and light and linked to nature. Now this, on the other side, is linked to, you actually don't need a lot of space in these houses. I think sometimes everybody uses the metric of square meterage. Now there is a requirement to have not too small, but actually it doesn't always work that way. Fantastic spaces often get you more value as the person living there, the use value, as well as economic value. And then how do we develop the house as people get less mobile? So this is what we did. This was the building that it was a finalist for various things. It was a low energy house, passive house. This is it. On the north side there, at the top of the screen, is a long wing here. So we used that to protect it from the north winds and the. So here we had 2 bedrooms on the top, a big bedroom here, and then the main room here, which could see out both sides. So it felt very much part of nature. And we had small openings on this side and opening to the views on this side. So this is a light. This was through the day. You can start to see the sun come into that big room in particular. And then this was it, with these low private roofs, a reflection pool on this side, and these huge windows, but looking very low and discreet. And then this is the other side opening out to the garden. So yeah, those 3 panels open up, and they're about 5 meters wide. And this was built well below the cost of the standard private house. It's got a copper roof which ages and speaks something of its modernity. It's a lot of light and space, and a lot of insulation as well. So this was designed to passive house standard. They didn't want to do all the active measures like the ground source heat pumps and the photovoltaics or the solar heat pumps. So it went to a silver standard. So it's very high insulation. Contrary to what people think, it was not, didn't have to have triple glazing to achieve all these standards, which is where a lot of the money is. And then this is inside. And the idea sort of spatially was to create an idea of intimate immensity, if you like. It's a big space, but it feels very intimate and generous. These seem contradictions in terms, but they're not. They just take a lot, effort to do. And then this is looking out across their garden here, and these are some of the details. And the light became pretty good. And our client was, well, none of us could quite believe it. So I don't know if there are any questions particularly about that, or should I just keep going? Should I just keep going, Michael? Is that the worst thing?
Yeah, you said that got built, did it?
That's all been built, yeah, and published, yes. So moving forward from this sort of value model, making the most of all the senses. So this is on the experience side of architecture, and the impact of that in sort of development terms is it makes it desirable and influential, and that is really powerful, that linkage. And these are some of the sort of things that I refer to. This is the Soane Museum. This is an 18th century. So this is the incorporation of art, light, special objects that should not be ignored, in my opinion. This was 1922. This is an artist gallery in Paris. So look how long, that's almost 100 years ago, that built. It looks like could have been built yesterday. So in many ways, we haven't come that far. This was 28 to 32, this sort of industrial style that we're seeing in Paris, again, Pierre Charot house. Yeah, so it's interesting. The challenge is there if we want to push it forward to the next stage of creating identities and beautiful things, even with industrial buildings. This is the use of art framing up landscape. This is in the UK. And then back to the Royal Ordnance, you also then got, why I'm showing this particular one is you get conflicts in culture, and physically this is quite interesting. If you can see the arrow, you can see this arch here, and you can see this building, and this was one of the ends of the store buildings, and when it was converted into a prison, and they actually chopped out one of the floors and then they put in 2 floors, they then stuck on this building, which was the prison hospital, and this here then was the front door. And then later on they converted this building back to stores again and knocked out the 2 floors and put in a single floor in the middle. And then they blocked this up, and this became a door. It became the quartermaster's store. So we have a series of different times and significance, and it's physical conflict here, which is what sort of illustrates this notion of interpretation and significance in historic terms, but it's basically the interpretation of value. And that's where we're all at, and navigating that within any of those value streams I've talked about is fascinating, and yeah, needs resilience. So this is a quote that we all know, and we shouldn't forget, really. And Gaston Bachelard, our dreams spread to our walls. So this is a very powerful thing we can do with everybody who's here. This is one of the this is building that's there. It's got fascinating details, beautiful texture, the exposed beams. It could become this, for example, which is if it's as flats. The section through the site these are existing sections. So you can see it comes along. There's the canal in the middle. There's this end building, which was where the gatehouse for the canals, which the first permission and has been built now as the museum for the site. And then it comes along and it goes down to the bottom terrace, which is quite wet actually. This was what it was like when Michael bought it, so pretty dilapidated. And the idea here was to put independent living on the bottom, on the lower terrace. It had to be low to respect the views out and back onto these larger buildings. This is a landscape plan, so looking at different natures of landscape across the site. These are the big views down the middle of the canal, views across out to the valley and back, and then different types of view landscape here. This is an abstract drawing. It'll make a bit more sense probably in a minute, but the big buildings we talked about marching down the side from the beginning really by the military, what we've taken is that typology and then rotated it and then created a lower building here, which we've looked at as a care home, because what we realized as part of that demographic analysis is that the aging population were being left behind. And we could, across this site together, give an opportunity for multiple demographies on it. And it's quite a bold thing to do. And yeah, Michael's always stressed that actually, you know, when in his previous experience with care homes, it was one of those things that kept value, I think, you know. So this was the low housing in abstract. We'd have a few windows on this side, it had to be said. So this was drawing on that experience of these open spaces and windows on the other side, but keeping it very discreet on the front side and hiding it in the landscape. And then they would also be designed as independent living. So all that first age to third age design that we talked about in the other house can be developed to the next generation. And on top of that, so this is the view down, planting some trees as well, trying to keep it a discreet, hard landscape. And then this is the view across from the other side of the valley. So you can see here the big buildings that the military built, and then this smaller building at the end here, and this courtyard building, which is the care home itself. And then these residences you can't really see, and that's the whole idea of trying to fit it in subtly. And then the care home is at the end here. So the services for these houses could always go up and use the services of the care home as necessary. And we put a space here where possibly that could be used by others to come down and use these communal buildings down here as well, within the typology. And this might be that communal space that physically looks back to, this is the existing bastion in the background, which is one of the corner buildings, and the wall could be physically part of the experience and identity of that building. And that is basically what I was going to take you through. And I'm going to come back to questions. So if there are questions or anybody's raised a hand, I just need to. So if there are any questions, please do post them. One I have for you, Michael, is this experience of the care home as the market went south, I seem to remember historically. And I was wondering if you might just share that and where that fits in.
The market for care homes, or property market generally? Property
market and how the care homes, yeah.
The care home, I was in the care home business, and I found that to be quite resilient with during the last recession. But that it's resilient. That was one reason for seeing if care would be suitable on this site. But also, it's something that I'm very interested in doing in any project I've got. I like the care business. And at the depot, there was an ideal piece of land that was crying out for some sort of development. And as you know, we got together and I suggested a care home. A care home has to have a certain amount of rooms to be viable, and we established that that amount could be fitted on. It's 60 upwards. But then also those low-level close care units were particularly interesting, and if at all possible, I think any care home development should have those, because when someone needs a care home, they often have a partner. That partner perhaps doesn't need the same amount of care as the person does, and that means that they could split up. You know, one goes in the care home because they need it, and the other person stays at their home, and that's a dreadful thing in itself. So close care accommodation is very good for that. So the couples could perhaps sell their home and buy this home, or lease it or rent it or whatever. If it's there, it's possible in one way. And then the services of the care home can tap in to the close care unit. It's down the pathway or road. It could be something like a golf buggy that could administer those services. The carer can visit the home, or the other way round. So I really like the idea of close care accommodation within the grounds of the care home, and we got it there. So it's very good for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, yeah, and that resilience, I think, is the thing, isn't it? Where, you know,
the economically, the gain that we'd get from the planning and doing it would then justify the expense needed on that bastion you saw, the other bastion, the other end. That whole area could be refurbished from any gain made. It would need to be refurbished anyway to make the whole thing look presentable and nice. You saw that big line of trees, that road. So you'd have to do all that for the development. And that's what I'm saying to the council. Say, well, you know, we don't need to be made to do it. It's obvious that we are going to do it as part of the scheme.
Yeah. No, fascinating. Yeah. And then in terms of where the energy sort of side of things go, I mean, obviously reusing building is one thing. Do you see any other sort of coincidences through this process where doing something environmentally sort of?
Yeah, well, I myself becoming much more aware of the environment. I think we all are, of course. We're getting educated, aren't we? News and different programs. I hadn't seen those low-level houses that you've done, Paul, for a while, and I just you just reminded me how great they look, and especially if they can be like the other one you showed on a few slides before, where it's carbon neutral, very economic, big windows. They're going to be great. But on the other areas, of course, Grade 2 listed 200-year buildings are quite hard to keep warm in the winter and cold in the summers. It's pretty difficult. But I've been looking at different ways, especially with the offices. So with workshops, not so needed, although you do need some heaters, and there's all sorts of things on the market, but they all seem to use a lot of energy. I've even been looking at wood burners. I get different opinions on wood burners, but I think it's green energy. They can be used, so I'm going to pursue that more and allow the tenants to use wood burners. I've been asked quite a lot, and I've sort of said no, because it conjures up images of danger, smoke, fumes, all sorts of things. But I had looked into the environmental side, and it's positive. And they used to have fires in the buildings. There's chimneys here and there, and I think we can go back to that. Also, I was looking at air conditioning and sort of trying to make some of the buildings very airtight for air conditioning and heating. And I thought, Christ, you know, it's just so much work. And the summer now, we had a very hot summer. Was it last year or the year before? And we simply by opening the windows and letting the draft through, it's very pleasant, very comfortable. We're on building 17, especially, is in a position where the wind blows across the fields. And I know it sounds very simplistic, but I don't think we need air conditioning. I would like it as a selling point, because office with air conditioning is worth more one without. But I'm not going to do it now. I'm just going to advertise it as that, that the windows are working well and you get a breeze across.
Well, natural ventilation was a big thing, wasn't it? And has been for a while. And it's those extremes. I mean, the theatre I was showing you was to be the first, I think, internal theatre in the world that was naturally ventilated. And the issue they had was at extreme points, it wouldn't quite meet the thermal comfort levels that the building regs wanted. So they decided to go with it. But actually, people could have put on a jumper, for those 3 or 4 days a year. So,
In the winter, keeping it hot is harder than keeping it cool, I think. I think we've got the breeze, and the buildings themselves are not enormous thick walls, and the way they've been built, they sort of stay cool in the summer. But in the winter, they are particularly cold inside, and we've got to look at ways of heating them, but different ways. There's no way that fitting a large heating system in there is going to work. I mean, it would work, but it would cost a lot of money to run it, and it would be bulky and lots of holes through walls. So we must find a way of heating it without costing a fortune every week and using energy. It's not just the cost, is it? It's the carbon footprint.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. Yeah, no, the environmental cost, and there's also the energy within building these, these condensers and the rest of it inherently.
Yeah. So we're looking at that. We're obviously looking at the way we deal with rubbish. We're going to create our own little waste transfer station there for the tenants' waste, the occupants' waste, with recycling. Just about to do that.
Well, fantastic. We've come to the end of an hour. It seems very quickly, and I fear that's probably the limit of people's attention span. Although I love it and it's fascinating. Just to say thank you for everybody who's come. If there are questions or you'd like to find out more, I think you've all got my email anyway, so please do get in touch and I can pass them on to the right people. And there are a couple more LFA talks that we're involved in later in the month, so I will contact and send out the invites as well. But this has been brilliant, and Michael, thank you so much for being here to talk us through the sharp edge of investing of oneself within this, and actually putting your money where your mouth is and going for it. And it's an amazing project. And
you're the brains of the operation. I've just bought it and do.
So yes, thank you. Well, I'll take that. But I don't think it's fully the case. Thank you, and have a great day. And I hope everybody's enjoyed it. And please do give us any feedback, which will be thoroughly welcome. Thank you for now.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. Very enjoyable.
Super. See you, everybody.